So I believe we're live now. Welcome everybody. Looking back at 2024, two-thirds of medium-sized businesses lost market share to more automated competitors. However, those who embraced strategic automation while maintaining human connections saw dramatic improvements, averaging 40% cost reduction and 60% faster time to market. Today, in early 2025, these gaps are widening even further. So,
That's exactly right. Yep. And that's why we're here today, right? We want to help you navigate this balance. And it's not just about implementing automation, it's about building a sustainable human centric business growth, especially as we're fighting with AI and the way that we're growing in the economies. And hopefully, under the new government we have, we're going to see a lot of growth.
great.
Just real
So,
quick,
Phil,
if I
yeah.
could have everybody listening, type one in the chat if you felt pressure to automate faster than your team can adopt.
Absolutely. So you guys can do that. You guys can type one if you ever felt pressure to automate faster than your team can adapt. And Philip, moving on to the question, before we dive into implementation, let's address the elephant in the room, the fear that automation means losing the human touch. How do successful businesses handle this?
So it's a great question. Let me share how Charlie Hussey, an entrepreneur
Mm-hmm.
apparel company, approached this while they
Uh-huh.
achieved a 20% increase in sales with a significant reduction in processing time and a zero additional headcount, right? So what they did for them, the key was that they started by mapping out the customer touch points and ensuring automation enhancements rather than replacing the human connections. Their team actually spent more time on the creative design and the
Mm-hmm.
customer relationships because of these routine tasks were then automated.
Great. So, Phil, how do we help businesses find that spot between automation and human connection?
Okay, so there's a process, right? You start by
Okay.
breaking down by business stage. So it's a little different for startups versus medium companies, right, or even larger companies, right?
Mhm.
But the entry point really starts off by automating routine communications while personalizing touch key points, right? So this is simple automations that will tend to save 15 20 hours per week for smaller medium companies. And with it, it's going to be investment 2 to 3,000 K for the average setup, right? The focus here is
Mhm.
to create deeper communications while automating
Absolutely.
the process and simplifying it for your staff. Uh, in the growth
Yeah.
stage, right? Once you've gone
Mhm.
past kind of like, so every entrepreneur or company knows the biggest problem for them is really
Mhm.
defining what their customer segment is, right? Because if it's a defined customer segment, the big companies already have it, it's established, right? Now you're trying to break into it. So entrepreneurs are in that startup place where they define it. Now, the next place for an entrepreneur is he's kind of found it out. He's gone through all that suffering. Hopefully he's done this within 3 to 6 months, right? And now they're ready to grow. They have that defined. So what they wanted to start doing is integrating systems that's going to help the teams, their internal teams, do things in an enhanced way, right? So you're thinking automating deployment cycles, you're thinking integrating AI into your communications, and
Mhm.
you're looking at how to start testing for process validation before you deploy it, right? You don't
Yeah.
in the beginning, a lot of companies try to do a lot of testing before
Mhm.
they deploy it, right? Because they want to do this test driven development. It's very charming, but when you're not really sure what your product to your customer is 100%, it becomes an extra expense, right? So that's why I say in the growth stage, once you've had that defined a little bit, then so for me, I find that this brings, and this is what I get. It's loose numbers, right? But I'm looking at this being a 30 to 40% gain on your productivity for your company. And so the investments to get this done, you're probably looking at $8,000 to $15,000 worth of development and research and process. That process to create it between code and research and design. It's not something you just do overnight, right? And it can take, I don't know, hard to say. I'd like to see this done within 3 to 6 weeks, depending on how complex your project is and your automations in your company. And then you get past that growth stage, right? You now really have a well-defined market segment. You've kind of defined your advertising. You know how to get customers for the most part. You know how to drive. You've got your whole kind of process defined, right? Now you're really looking at AI enhancements to your operations with emphasis on two things: building relationships for your contacts, for your supports, for your key resources and your key stakeholders and your key customers. And you're also looking at building up optimizations and processes to make it so that you have redundancy. You can take care of chaos when it happens. You start planning in chaos into your testing environments. I know some of my friends that said they're going to be on here. Love chaos integrations in DevOps. It's a lot of fun. So I think it's probably not a topic for this call, but at this stage, while you're looking to scale, right? I call this a scaling stage. This is where you can start integrating all that. So for example, what happens if you have a database system that totally goes offline for 2 minutes, right? Let's say it just goes down for 2 minutes. The connection, somehow the redundancies, there's just total chaos, right? How do you recover from that? What happens if you have a data breach, right? Simulate a data breach and see what happens. See what processes you have to make sure you stay compliant and that you're able to handle these. You start coming up with these scenarios that start taking you into stage 4, which I'll talk about kind of loosely in a second. But you start just looking at the low end chaos events. What happens if you lose your database? What happens if a server goes off? Turn things off. Go there, see what happens, right? You want to see what happens and start making some SOPs around that. And what I found in this stage is that you're looking at an investment of probably 20 to 30,000, right? You're going to, at this stage, get a revenue increase now. So you're not just looking at efficiency increases. Now you can start tracking revenue increases because you're able to scale things. It's important that we do these things in order, because if we try to jump ahead, there's things you have to redo a lot of, right? And it's very natural to say, look, Phil, I wanted to go right into all these automations in the scaling stage, even though I'm just in the discovery process of my ideation. Right. I'm just starting to think about my project. I want to go ahead and have all that so I can sleep better knowing nothing's going to happen. That's not entrepreneurship. That you need to get a job selling jewelry or something. The fourth stage is when you're building your business model now, right? You're a medium size. You might at this stage be a medium-sized company with 50, 100 employees. You've learned how to scale. You understand your clients. You're not an entrepreneur anymore. You maybe have a board of advisors, right? You're a full kind of company that's getting very serious, and you're now accountable to people. And these stakeholders are saying, okay, cool. You have a couple $1 million of investment. Everybody believes in you. What happens when this happens, right? This is when you really want to get heavy into the automations for your systems to make sure that if you have a chaos event, that systems are automatically kicking in to cover that for you, that you're getting reports. Now everything should be a data mining opportunity for you, because you've got everything defined now, right? You don't want to lose that entrepreneur at this stage. You still don't want to lose that entrepreneurial spirit, right? You're not Coca-Cola, right? You didn't create Christmas back in 1900s.
Mhm.
So you're still in your hopefully some growth, right? And you keep pushing, you're playing with your business model now, right? This is when you also combine the automations with your business model development, and it's still a very exciting stage. After that, you're going public. You probably want to sell off your company to somebody else
Mhm.
and start over and have fun, because it's getting boring for the entrepreneur, and it's
Yeah,
time
that
to
happens.
bring in some stable minded Tim
Yeah.
Cook.
Yeah, right. So, Phil, we are having a question from our audience, Cassie. How do you recover from a database outage? I'd love to know.
Oh, that's such a good question. So um there's a few things that happens when you have a database outage. First of
Okay.
all, let's assume that you had backups, and that
Mm-hmm.
it's just an outage and it wasn't a breach of data, right? So you don't have any
Mm-hmm.
compliance, you don't have to worry about any people. Now the question is, do you, first thing, put the fire outs. Hope restore the database if you can, right? A good DevOps guy is going to say, hey Phil, you should have already had a redundancy. If you're using something like Planet Scale, right, then they already have at least one set of redundancy in there, so it's going to be less common. But you can simulate that same process by having mirrored databases, so that if you have an extended outage, it's fallen back. This can be difficult to set up, but it's very much worth it when you're in the third stage in the growth, in that growth stage, right? I wouldn't start there in the beginning stage when you're kind of discovering what everything's about, because it's a bit of an expense. To put a price tag on it, I'd have to say you're looking at, probably, depending on the complexity of your system, you're probably looking at $2,000 to $4,000 of investment to set up those pipelines and those redundancies. And you're looking at additional monthly expenses to have the additional databases set up, because that has to be live and it's got to be ready to go quick. So it's
Great.
got to always be that on. Hey
Oh,
Cassie,
all
let me
right,
know
all
if you
right.
think I answered that.
Okay, Cassie, you can write that in the comment section.
Cassie, by the way, is one of my
So,
heroes. Really good guy.
okay, great. So, Phil, since we love networking, we love to talk about
Let me
networking.
stand up.
How do you think, how does networking change as the businesses automate more process?
Okay. So automation should free up time for
Mhm.
meaningful activities and connections and and processes. So what I mean by that is, look in the beginning, look to see where your biggest bottlenecks are and your highest risks. So the first place I like to look for automation is there a risk that is going to cause me to lose business or go out of business? And once I've solved that, and hopefully there's really nothing that needs to be automated, right? That I have to, that's going to be like disastrous. Then I start looking, okay, where can I focus that's going to make my life easiest, right? As the entrepreneur or
Mhm.
businessman, what's going to give me the highest return on my investments? So I tend to see that as creating a continuous integration pipeline, maybe continuous deployment, but the continuous deployment can be manual in the very beginning.
Okay.
First of all, I like to get that pipeline going. So I have checks, seeing if when I commit code that it's working, is validated, that it's secure. It goes through that process to make sure that everything
Mhm.
is being effective. Actually, let me see if I can share um, this screen right here. Give me 1 second. I have a little graphic. I don't know if I can throw it. Slides or PDF. I should have become more familiar with this window.
Okay.
Share. Okay, guys, tell me, just put like a one in the chat if you can see this image.
Mhm. Guys, can you see the image correctly? If you can, just put that into comment.
Okay. I don't see anybody responding, so I'll try to describe it in case nobody can see it. So
Okay.
what you have is in the graphic I'm showing, and I'll link it in the chat later, is
Mm-hmm.
um, a pipeline, and I have it kind of looking like a waterfall effect, and I know that's going to trigger some people. But
Mm-hmm.
okay, thank you, Clayton. Appreciate it. Much love, brother. Um, so it starts with your development, right? And just really,
Mm-hmm.
it just starts at understanding what you need to monitor and how to quantize that. But that's hard to do in the very beginning. Sometimes you create the pipeline, right? The whole continuous integration pipeline. And then you go back and say, okay, this is what I need to monitor and this is what's important to me. But you can assume a few things. You want to make sure that the code you're deploying doesn't have bugs, that it's not going to crash the app, that it's a certain percentage of bug-free activity, right? Or reports, but for sure it's not crashing your app, right? Your product. So you starts off by having that deployment pipeline where you have your
Mm-hmm.
code changes, it goes to the repository, and there's a process of pull request that then gets merged into the continuous integration pipeline, which then goes and does further testing, right? It does the linting, it makes sure that the code is clean and formatted properly. Has some automated testing. It does security scans on it, and then it builds it and makes sure it's able to build. After that, the continuous deployment pipeline is another process where it sends it to staging, where you can go and test it and make sure it's really working. You have somebody go in there, manually test it. You can have
Mm-hmm.
automated quality assurance testing there. You have your further security checks because now it's on a full system and you can see how it's all integrating together. And then you can send it to production in real time, right? It's good to not fully automate all that, in my opinion, but to have that process so that you say, okay, cool, now we've done our internal testing, we've done our quality insurance, we've had a few people on that, the system says it's good to go, all our tests that we have are legit, we're confident, then you go into production. I like to, as often as possible, do a scaled deployment. So you don't do
Mm-hmm.
a 100% deployment out to the world. You send it out to 5% or 10% of your users. And that way you have a chance to still recover if there's anything that's massively wrong. Believe me, it'll save your reputation at least once in your career if you do this. This process then goes back into the monitoring where it looks at your performance metrics. There should be an alert system to let you know if there's any uncaught errors or any statistics, or downtime, uptime, right? Any kind of measurable information. I like to have it up in here. And there's a feedback loop that's at least in the very beginning, it's more informal. You look at it, you're kind of and the admins are kind of like talking about it. Your leadership is saying, okay, cool, this is how it's going. You maybe disseminate certain information to your key developers, and then the process just starts back over. Because it's a continuous pipeline, this is largely informal. You can have guys doing little pieces of code, and you can do this 100 times a day, right? That's what's great about a nice pipeline. You can do it very rapidly. You can do it as many times in a day as is reasonable, right? If you've read the Phoenix Project, you know their goal was to do 100 a day. Same process.
Great. So, Phil, we're going to take a question from our audience here. Daniel. Daniel is asking, automation has become the necessity of almost every business. So, what should be the due diligence to select credible service provider when there are numerous service providers?
Mm. Due diligence to pick a service provider can be super challenging. The look at what they've done. Obviously, see if you. I think it should be like dating, right? Because we're talking. So assume we're talking about mobile apps here, right? This is like in a marriage. This is the service provider you're talking about is an agency, then
Mhm.
be very serious about it. Take some time, date it, talk to them. Hopefully they have some content online. You can see their style and the way they think, and to see if it matches the way you work. Creating an app, it's like making a movie, right? You can do it in a budget way. You can take your phone and go record a movie and throw it up on Facebook, or you can make a Hollywood production or world-class production, right? It all depends on the goal that you're trying to reach. Now, if it's not an app that you're looking for, maybe it's just a website, right? Depending on that risk in there, you may just give a couple different people a try. You may try one guy first, see if you like him based off his reputation. If you don't like it, try another guy, dance around. The more risk you have, the more you got to be kind of picky about it. Now, if you're talking about how to pick service providers like an AI tool that you're going to use inside your business in an app, then what you want to do is talk to them, get a reasonable amount of free access so that you can go in, test the app, test those APIs in the sandbox, and make sure it's validating it. And you want to make sure you load test it and maybe even do a little chaos testing. I've had so many providers where we were, especially in AI, where I wanted to use their systems for I'm not going to throw anybody under the rug, but for voice translate, for text to speech, right? Where they promised that the system was this, it could output this. And then when we started testing the system and load testing it, even before we went to live production, we found that the system was getting bugs at higher outage, at higher usage. And you really had to sit down and listen to it, because if you just played it and run it in the beginning, right, you wouldn't notice it. But when you sat down and listened to it, we were finding that voices would be changing. So it was expected to have one voice, and in the middle of the story, it'd go from this nice common voice to this, this other weird voice. And it was from just an even different section of the voice output options. So it's one thing. There's two stages. Test the API, see if they work, see if the documentation is clear, see how hard it is going to be to use. Then see it under load pressure. See how fast, how much you can stress that API. See, would it work for 1 million users if that's your requirement? If you only need 10 users concurrently, test it for 10 users, but test it for 15 users, right? Don't test your minimum. Test your maximum plus 50%. Or 20%, right? Whatever. I mean, if your expected user base is 2 million users, I wouldn't say test it for 3 million concurrent users, right? That's a big, but I may say 2,200,000 users, right? So
I hope that answers your question, Daniel. So yeah, so Phil, we're gonna back onto the implementation of the packs and team development. Let's talk about bringing teams along on this journey. What would you say on that?
Cool. So when bringing teams in on this journey, right, we've developed along 3 tracks that balance the technical and the human needs, right? So at the beginning stage, it kind of goes back to the stages I mentioned before. In your bootstrap stage, when you're under, when you're under, say 25,000, right, of investment, right? When this is your credit card, this is your kind of risk money, right? You're still saying, hey, I'm not asking friends yet. I'm not putting my life savings on this. This is, kind of like, 5 to 25,000, right? What you want to do is have a 30-day implementation where you are developing the concept, where you're looking at the needs and you do the initial discovery and planning stages that's going to help you understand the whole process. Where normal discovery may take 14 to 30 days for a a whole project that's $50,000 to $80,000, then you're looking at this 30 days kind of to work through the process, right? Because you need to have your initial discovery done first. You have to understand your systems. You have to understand the process, right? And it's where the real brain work happens, really, in my opinion. So now you're past, and the only focus on this is essential automation and team adoption, right? So the reason it takes 30 days is because you want to make sure everybody's using it. You're setting things up, right? And you're just getting, you're really just getting your feet in the water and making sure that you have the structure to get you going forward. The next stage is the growth stage. This is where you're really building your app and moving forward, right? So you're not in your MVP anymore, or you're at the very end of your MVP and you're about to go into your version 1, right? This is where you're looking at putting a 10 to 20,000 investment in this. You're looking at probably a 90-day process of building tests, of building integrated solutions, of building the team skills up in this particular phase. And there's multiple people to this team, right? There's the stakeholders, and then there's developers, and then there's, of course, the people in between, the administrators, right? And by administrators, I mean the project managers and the key stakeholder that is leading the project. So there's a lot to learn in this stage, and this is where you're really starting to look at that monitoring stage to see what's critical, what to watch for, and you're starting to look through some of those edge cases to say, hey, what's really going to hurt us, right? Now in stage 1, I want to make sure that I can build, right? That's it. I want to do the pipeline. I want to push. I want it to go to staging. When the staging is good, I want to go to my quick Q&A, and I want it to go to production, right? Now, after you get that, right, you're looking at the enterprise track. This is customized to your particular needs. And it's when you are in maybe at the tail end of your growth stage, because during the growth stage, in the previous stages that I talked about, you've defined your customer. You are now know how you do marketing. You are now in the business growth stage where you're doing all your marketing. You're trying to maintain a healthy, stable system. You have profits, hopefully, right? And you are now making sure that you're providing an amazing quality assurance to your users, along with just that, not just the functionality you provide those amazing, but you're making sure that the quality is top notch and that you're able to be flexible and adjust features quickly. This is a phased approach that you take over time and is very specific to each company. And it's pretty interesting. On this one, this is kind of like where I like to do all that chaos discovery and preparations, and also that includes making sure servers go down. What happens if you have a data breach? Right, database going down is in that previous stage. That's kind of like the growth stage where you want to make sure that you're able to quickly recover from a database. Because when you're growing rapidly, that's when you see a lot of things break. That's when you're seeing a certain amount of chaos coming from just your user base.
Great. Phil, you answered that question pretty well. And how can professionals ensure that they're really building skills that remain relevant in this ever-changing digital landscape?
So obviously there's a few good books to help build your mindset. In this one, I think the Phoenix Project is one of those. The DevOps Handbook is another good one just to help build your mindsets. But it starts with building your fundamental skills that transcend specific tools. Like tools are great. They're going to change. We're seeing tools change very rapidly nowadays. Right. But what I'm talking about is that ability to think critically, that problem solving ability that cannot be trained on the spot, that takes time to build and to adapt, and the ability to be both adaptive and also take critical feedback. And if you're more advanced, the ability to give critical feedback that people are able to hear. I think that's a superpower. It's not very easy for anybody to both deliver critical feedback in a meaningful way. It's harder to do than receiving it sometimes. But either side of that, it's good, right? I always love with my teams when they're able to be critical, really critical and open, and say their hearts and their minds, and to grow from that. And when they in the environment allows that, and see when the environment of the business sees that as love and not as a challenge to somebody's ego. So while those are kind of soft skills, I think they're super fundamental. I want to pair that with industry specific certifications or trainings that's going to help maintain relevance for the current time and the industry, right? That's specific for what you're into. And just remember that upscaling isn't a one-time effort. It's an ongoing process that's you repeat over and over. And I look at it as something that brings joy to your life rather than something you
Exactly.
have to do, right? If you
Yeah,
don't
that's
feel
so
like
true.
growing is fun, I don't know if the tech industry is your place at the time.
Yeah, that is so true, Phil. I found that scheduling part. It's a short, consistent learning session that helps you integrate skill building. It helped me a lot in different ways, and I have to like integrate skill building into my busy routine as well. So, what do you recommend for those struggling to balance upskilling with daily demands?
So that's a challenge for me too. Um, and it's not a challenge that you ever get over, because the better you get at it, the more you kind of crave it. So here's I'll start with what I recommend, and I'll tell you what I do. And of course, I don't recommend anybody do what I do, especially my kids. So start small and prioritize quality over quantity, right? Even deciding
Okay.
like a 15 minutes a day to start learning, it's going to lead you to significant improvement over time. And think just 1% per day, right? Just if you can do 1% per day on on weekdays, or even, worst case on weekends, right? Okay, great, right? Leverage platforms like LinkedIn Learning or Coursera or Udemy for some flexible options. Now
Great.
that's the easy, right? That's the spoon fed
Okay.
option, right? Um, what
Okay.
I do, and spoon fed is good, right? You got to start there. You got to start building those muscles. When you start doing this, you're going to get tired at first. If you've been out of school for a little bit and you haven't been really working on it, you get tired. It's okay. It's like learning something totally different. Which the
Yes, I'm
science
agreeing with
says
that.
one of my biggest scares in life is when I get old, I'm going to get nuts.
Mhm.
Like I'm just going to lose it all, right? So, for one of the best ways they say to prevent Alzheimer's is that once a month at least, you work on a skill that is totally wacky, that's totally outside of your normal realm. And it's going to
Mhm.
kind of make you tired, especially when you first start this. It's going to make you tired. It's going to be hard. You're going to see natural resistance to doing this. But this helps build new networks in your mind so that you're able
Mhm.
to learn more in the fast long term and retain things, and it creates a stronger mind. So if you're real good at math, then work on languages, or work on
Right.
playing instruments, or work on learning a new game, right? Or learn how to do a podcast or something that just you would not like to normally do, right? And make that
That
just
was
a
great.
habit of doing
Hmm.
what you do. Another thing that I do is I will work on just learning facts that are unusual, that don't apply to anything. And over time, you create relationships out of nowhere that are just amazing, right? So, a bulk of useless information can come up to meaningful connections and creativity in the long run. Uh,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
take, 3 or 5 minutes a day, read random facts, read something, learn something just out of the place that doesn't make any sense on Udemy or someplace. Go do whatever. I just random books, and I'll go on. Like I have a prompt on chat. Hey, give me a random topic that I haven't covered before, and I just have it read it to me, and I kind of listen to it, and I'm like, okay, cool, I understood this. And it's like, no, I meant something else, but
That's
okay.
quite cool. Mm.
Also, what I do is I have audiobooks because I don't have a lot
Mhm.
of time for books. I go through a lot of audiobooks. Probably
Okay.
every day I'll do 30 minutes to 2 hours. Very random. It's all dependent on my flow and my energy. A lot of this,
Mhm.
except for the ones I say do for 5 minutes and challenge yourself every day. A lot of this has to go with your flow, your energy, right? It's like working out. If you don't feel good for working out one day, go to the gym, work out a little bit. Don't pull your muscles, right? Listen to your body, listen to your mind and your energy. Go with the flow. So audiobooks is something I do almost every day. The last thing that I think is beneficial um, is if you want to on your lunch break take 10 or 15 minutes, have a top list of topics that you're interested in, and have ChatGPT or Claude give you a lesson, and it can read to you. It can you can interact with it. I would say give it the prompt of act as a teacher and walk me through this, teach me through this. Like you're a teacher and I was a you name it, right? A 5-year old learning math or a PhD degree that knows everything and wants to do something else, right? However you want it to engage with you on your lunch break, do this. And I saw a new feature on ChatGPT, the app that it can run in the background while it interacts with other apps. So I haven't tried this, but it might be useful. And the very last thing that is not for everybody, but it was something I do, is I with a friend do a podcast on books. And this isn't a plug, this is just what I do. Where we
Yeah.
get together, we do personal growth and challenge each other, right? We're just two
Okay.
buddies. Uh, since I'm calling it, the podcast is two dudes with a mug, right? And it's basically
Oh,
like two
that's
guys.
cool.
Yeah, it's right. It's fun. It's casual. We go through a book, and we may go through one book in 3 or 6 months, right? But we go deep and we challenge ourselves, and it's a lot of fun, right? So these are all ways to help grow those skills in unusual ways.
Well, that was quite helpful. Phil, we're gonna take questions from our audience. Here's one. Do you have any recommendations for how someone can learn more about chaos engineering? Perhaps a great book on the subject, one that has the many 5 stars reviews on Amazon. Cassie.
Cassie,
Okay.
I do, and because I'm under such peer pressure, I'm trying to remember the name. I'm drawing a blank. I love it. Can you throw the name of that book in the chat for me real quick to help recall my memory?
Hmm. I can see some tension going on here. Yeah.
Love this guy.
So great.
Um,
So we're
guys,
yeah.
Cassie, I'm gonna go ahead and plug Cassie. Right, this is a friend of mine from back when I was doing Ruby on Rails 15 years ago. Right, amazing
Great.
guy, good leader in the industry, really smart. Anything that Cassie does, I think you should check him out. His name is Cassie Rosenthal. Check him out on LinkedIn. Really good guy, good heart, good guy, and smart as hell.
Great. We learned a lot about you, Cassie, as well. So we're gonna take another question from our audience. Gina here is saying, what advice would you give to somebody trying to stand out in a crowded job market?
Mm. So to
Something
stand
that a
out,
lot of us struggle with.
yeah. So obviously you want to stand out in a crowded market instantly, um, which is a great thing to do, but kind of hard, right? So what we see, uh, uh I'm going to. Can we see that? There it is. This is that link
Yeah.
we were talking about. So what you want to do to stand out. Hmm. So TikTok, and of course, always, depending on guys, girls, you can get undressed or not. I'm kidding, right? To stand out, you should have a voice, and you should have a something that's interesting to people to stand out. Right now, one thing,
Mhm.
consistency, right? Getting out there, uh, giving enough content, giving enough of yourself, and having a clear message. That's really helpful. But also being that consistent that you are, and uh, being a true person. That personal branding, I think, is something that you should start with
Mhm.
from when you're young, right? So I don't mean TikTok, right? I don't think that kids should be on TikTok, for
Absolutely.
example, right? I don't
Mhm.
think that anybody should be revealing about the way they present themselves. I think it's much more interesting in the long run to be in a beautiful mind, right? So do things that are interesting,
Mhm.
show some projects, have some passion projects. If you don't have anything that you're passionate about, why would somebody be interested in what you do? Right. So I think it starts with having a message, getting that message out there. And as you grow, you're going to modify that message. You're going to make it more of yourself. You're going to discover yourself, and you're going to discover that audience that cares about you. And hopefully the earlier you learn to do this and that you start doing this, the sooner you can really dive deeply into yourself and to see what's
Mhm.
truly fascinating and fun and relatable about yourself that's going to draw people to you. You don't need a huge audience in the world to be very successful. Um, so have fun, right? Think when you're creating the message, say, hey, how do I help people, right? How do I bring value to the world in a way that's meaningful? Like I think we're maybe going into a world where money isn't as relative as it used to be. I think people are going to be able to survive and to do okay, and have to look at work in a way that it's something that provides value to life and how you bring value to your community. So I think we're really coming into very interesting times of what it means
Mhm.
to be an influencer or to have a message or to interact with your community.
Great. So, Phil, there's another question that we're going to move on to. That is by Feza. What impact does automation have on the skill set of workers, and how might this affect future markets?
Good question. So automation really can destroy some useless jobs, right? So if
Okay.
your job is replaced by automation, then you need to level up your skills. Don't be scared of it because
Mhm.
it's going to happen, right? You're going to get, if you're like, how many jobs this year have been lost due to McDonald's having those little machines where you put in your order and you don't even talk to the
Absolutely.
cashier anymore, right? Just there's like one
Exactly.
cashier now, and he just is there to get yelled at, right? I think his job is like
Getting
microphone,
you.
right? You just got to sit there and look
Yeah.
pretty and not lose his temper. So the automation is going to ruin jobs, and it's going,
Mhm.
and AI on top of that, integrated with automation, is going to make it so you can't get away with being brainless. um, but that said, some things cannot be automated out of existence. There's value to a hand painted picture, even if it's poorly done, right? There's value to something done by hand when you can take two pictures and you say this was printed or made by an AI robot, and this one I saw John Doe make this and he autographed it after I asked him to do that, right? That's something that's not replaceable. This is that human connection. So automation is going to wipe out a large amount of people and jobs, hopefully not people, right? I want the people to stay. The jobs can come or go, but if your job is able to replace by automation, was it a job you really enjoyed
Mhm.
in the first place?
That's a right question. No one should be asking.
Yeah.
So,
Make it better. Get
yeah.
deeper into that skill set. Get so deep, so creative into it that
Mhm.
if an AI system could do it, could it really do it like you? And even if
Mhm.
so, is there enough value to a person doing it? There's that connection that makes it worth it to have you do it versus a robot.
Great. So, Phil, we're going to move on to the other question that is from Daniel Paul again. If the resources are there, what is advisable to subscribe to already available service or to create in-house application? And how do you project the utility of the service in the longer run? For instance, when the number of users grow as the company grow and more integration of processes are needed.
Mm, so cool question. Okay.
Definitely.
It depends on the service you're trying to integrate. I try
Mhm.
to use Builder.io to be a headless CMS system that a headless content system that allowed the owner to design certain pages by themselves and um, to kind of offload some from developer work to their work. The hope was that it would be faster and they could do on the spot things without having to deal with the designer and developers, and they could just do it by themselves, right? It was, I want to do it myself.
Mhm.
It turned out that the way they ended up wanting to use the system became very counterproductive and it didn't fit within the system. So you have to look at what happens if the resource or the service that you're using goes, first of all, it doesn't work the way it should. If it doesn't grow well with you, will it become expensive to use in the long run, or does it get you to where you need to go? Right now, sometimes it's okay to use a service to get
Okay.
started and to test out a concept. MVP, I think that's great sometimes. Build it, make sure you can build it into your system in a way that's
Mhm.
disjoined and not tightly bound. That tightly bound part is when you start getting into trouble, right? So it's one thing to have a system that handles blogs and some website and some certain components, but it's another thing if you're trying to have it do way more than it's kind of intended to, which is very natural, right? You have to be super clear on what's the extent of those services, and sometimes that's not clear at all. A lot of the times it's not really clear. So there's risk anytime you use a service. If you can build it in initially at a low cost and with a subset of the features that are good enough to get you going, that might be a better idea. But it's
Mhm.
really something you have to sit down, look at the requirements on a case by case basis, and say, okay, cool, it makes sense. A great example, right? I was talking to a guy and he wants to have his own AI system, right? Because he doesn't want to have this
Mhm.
information put on ChatGPT, right? Because he thinks that it's going to use the train. I don't think it does, right? It may help, but it may take the responses and say, okay, this is how we build the model better, but it's not going to take their data through the API. So unless somebody thinks it does, and if there's a case of that, let me know. I'm looking forward to seeing that one. But
Mhm.
then he's like, okay, cool. But I want it in my, I'm going to have it this way. So I'm going to build my own system. I'm like, okay, cool. We can build your own AI system. We can train it, but here's the numbers of what it's probably going to cost. It's an open budget a little bit, right? You're looking at $30,000 worth of hardware, for example, for what your requirements are. That's on the low end. You're going to have to
Okay.
do 3 or 4 months worth of training, maybe a year worth of training to get it to really do it your way. If you don't want to use some of these other models, there's some open source models that help make that faster, right? Right now, there's an
Mhm.
R1 model that's from a Chinese university, open source. That's pretty amazing. I haven't built that up yet, but I saw that it works as well or close to as well as OpenAI's O1. And so there's a lot of options, but you have to look at the cost and see if it really makes sense. Sometimes when you see the cost of hardware, you're like, you know what? Maybe I'll just go ahead and use that service to take care of part of my work.
Great answer, Phil. There's a very good question here. I'm going to quickly ask you that. How do you balance the benefits of automation with the risks it poses to job security? It's for Hamzan.
Mm. Say the question again, please.
How do you balance the benefits of automation with the risk it poses to job security?
Mm. um, so good question. If you're scared about your job, you're probably in the wrong place. The if you're
Mm, cool.
so as a business, you're looking say you're I think this is the question. If you're a business and you say, gosh, if I do this automation, I'm going to probably have to fire half of my company, half of my labor, because they're not going to have anything to do. It's not true, first of all, right? Now,
Yeah.
okay, maybe you'll have a reduction in what you have, but here's how I like to look at it. Automation will replace people, and if you don't, you're not going to be competitive anymore, because somebody will come in with automation, do it better and more creatively than you, and put you out of business. So those people won't have a job anymore, and they're on their resume, it's going to say, yeah, from some failed company, which is not great for them for the next job, right? So they're going to lose their job, and they're going to have a bad resume reference, and it's very sad for
For the
everybody,
next one.
right?
Yeah.
So do the automation, right? If it makes sense, right? Sometimes automation may not be much cheaper than what you're doing, right? So then see if the automation makes sense, right? Not all automations make sense. And as you saw, there's different stages for automation. Now, generally what I see is that you're able to do two things as a business. And this is kind of cutthroat.
Okay.
You can get rid of your lowest performers, because really you've increased your efficiency massively. So you can get rid of your lowest performers, the ones that probably weren't happy working for you in the first place because they weren't out producing, they weren't getting rewarded the way they want, the work wasn't meaningful, right? These people are unsatisfied in the first place, and they're probably not in that place in the first place. 5% to 10%, that's fairly normal, right? You're going to find these guys tend to just move on happily and not be upset that you fired. They know it's coming. The others, you're going to be able to utilize them better. They're going to do more interesting work, more value providing work. They're going to shift from redundant tasks to being able to do more faster, bring better value. So just because you're changing the work with automation, you're now hopefully taking some guys that are experienced with your product, that know it inside out, and are able to be creative, to test things faster, to put something to staging, test it, see if it works, see if the stakeholders love it, and with less risk and costs to the owner of the company, right? So it's a win-win. When you increase automation, you now have the chance to be more creative, reduce errors. You can be more creative, because automation is if you have the testing stage in there good, you can say, hey, does this work, right? You shouldn't be like gambling, right? It's not Russian roulette, but you should be able to now be more creative, take more risk, because you can do things faster, and you can see if it's working, if it's making sense. Whereas in the old model, without automation, without pipelines, and without where we were doing waterfall things, and you're planning engineering out 18 months ahead, right? Any decision you made was a huge risk. Now, every decision you can experiment, you can split test. You might have off the wall ideas, and you might have been like there's like a Dr. Seuss cartoon, I think, with the guy running around with a hammer that did all kinds of crazy stuff, and they kicked him out of the village until he came back and saved it or something. If I remember right, there's a long time since I read Dr. Seuss, but you can now be that crazy guy running around with the hammer doing experiments and seeing what works and what's giving better results, and testing things in a smaller way, in a safer way. I think automation is great. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about getting fired over it. If you're losing sleep over that, that should be a sign that you don't have enough skills that are valued in the marketplace. And if you have that feeling, I really would encourage you to be more aggressive on your learning and creating projects that are fun and interesting, both for you and for people, and create your personal brand so that you share that with people, and you gain energy and join a community that's exactly into that. And don't be afraid to bounce around a few communities and to experiment, see what you like. Sometimes this personal discovery, we're going to go through so much personal discovery in the next decade that humanity is going to be at a whole new creative level. Just enjoy the ride.
Great. Phil, so as we close, what is the one piece of advice that you would like to give or leave our audience with?
If I had to, after all that, if I had to leave you with one piece of advice, it's simple. Stay curious, be proactive. The digital age rewards those that embraces challenge and continuously adopt and thrive in that and make it a game, right? Look at building that core skill base and then start having fun and adapt and challenge yourself and grow. And remember, the journey is just as important as the destination. And just like having little kids, you got to enjoy it when it's hard and when they're little.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Phil. And big thank you to our audience for your participation and engagement today. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel if this session is valuable for you. Stay tuned for more insightful discussions, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for being with us today. Take care
Very
of
cool.
yourself.